Kai'Sa is one of the flashiest marksmen in the game. She has this rather peculiar property of being an auto-attack based champion, while at the same time coming with unique spell combos and interactions, making her quite hard to master. However, learning how to play Kai'Sa the right way comes with a massive payoff. Yes, on the one hand, you will have to invest quite a bit of time if you want to pilot the champion properly, but on the other hand, Kai'Sa rewards you with options and outplay potential other AD carries could only dream of. But as skill-intensive as Kai'Sa might look, you don't need to worry, because in this video you will learn everything you need to know about Kai'Sa in less than 10 minutes. Kai'Sa's passive is a huge portion of the champion's overall damage output. It is also the main reason to opt for an attack speed focused build, so you can reliably delete people with a 5-stack execute damage, but we'll talk about your items more in depth later in the video. The ramping on hit and detonation damage lets Kai'Sa truly shine when it comes to single target DPS, which means she is also really good at taking down the jungle objectives of Dragon and Baron. On the other side of that coin though, your early game is rather weak, since you will be lacking the attack speed to stack your passive reliably. However, if your support can lock the enemy down so you have enough time to get all 5 stacks on your opponent, Kai'Sa can trade very favorably even early on. While it is true that Kai'Sa should be careful in lane and prioritize farming in order to unlock her amazing late game, it is important that you still follow up when your support finds an opening. Kai'Sa is weak when you cannot detonate her passive execute damage, but extremely OP when you can. Kai'Sa's Q is by far your most important spell for the early to mid game. Your single target DPS with this tool is absolutely brutal if you can get it off on an isolated opponent so they get hit by all the bullets instead of them spreading out. The bad news, however, is that your Q damage is quite laughable when you are close to enemy minions, since the wave will tank a large portion of your Q for them. Avoid situations like these as much as possible. But if you can get the enemy far enough away from their minions to get the isolation damage on them, Kai'Sa can go toe-to-toe even with the biggest lane bullies. The same is true in the late game, as your evolved Q positively murders opponents who are out of position. Therefore, you always want to purchase as much attack damage as necessary to upgrade this spell as early as possible, which also drastically improves Kai'Sa's wave clear before focusing on more attack speed. Isolated, upgraded Q in combination with your passive execute damage actually gives Kai'Sa crazy assassination potential. As a result, you can oftentimes kill opposing assassins before they can kill you, since they will always isolate themselves trying to dive you. Kai'Sa lives where other AD carries would just die. Kai'Sa's W is kind of counterintuitive. It looks like it is made for poking, and sure enough, you can use it for poke damage in lane for example, but that's not really its purpose. The true power of this spell lies hidden in the fact that it applies 2 stacks of your passive at once when you hit your target with it. This means just 3 auto attacks are already enough to get to 5 passive stacks and execute your opponent. Even in the late game where you have plenty of attack speed, this still matters, since full stacking your passive only half a second earlier can be the difference between life and death. Giving a fed opponent just a little bit more time would allow them to assassinate you or your ally, whereas denying their damage by killing them instantly lets you survive and carry the fight. The passive stacks applied by your W also allow you to cast your ultimate on otherwise unreachable enemies for a surprise assassination, but we'll talk more about Kai'Sa's ultimate in just a second. Kai'Sa's E is your main kiting tool. Even though it is neither a dash nor a blink, it still allows you to outplay skill shots to some degree. The spell is one of Kai'Sa's core defensive options, and knowing when to use it and when to hold on to it will be a huge part of your skill expression as a Kai'Sa player. As a rule of thumb, it is better to save your E for opposing crowd control spells specifically, as crowd control is the biggest counter to Kai'Sa. But while saving the spell is always the safe play, it is of course tempting to occasionally use it for its bonus attack speed to push a tower for example. And this is completely fine as long as you are still able to safely disengage afterwards. Yet the real magic happens once you get access to your evolved E. Now the spell has enormous offensive potential as well, since you can approach and then kill your target out of stealth with the massive attack speed steroid. Spamming E forward is not just a very safe way of approaching due to invisibility, but the movement speed bonus also compensates for Kai'Sa's below average auto attack range very effectively. Alright, Kai'Sa's ultimate. Certainly the spell with the steepest learning curve. It sure has plenty of different applications, and one of them is, unsurprisingly, using its mobility to again make up for Kai'Sa's lackluster range. Running away from Kai'Sa without ultimates? Easy. With ultimate? Impossible. Even the most mobile enemies are virtually helpless against Kai'Sa's chasing potential. Using R aggressively is a one-way street though, but if you can snipe a fed enemy to collect their shutdown gold, it will still always be worth it. The only thing you need to keep in mind when it comes to aggressive Rs is that it is always best to use it as late as possible. The lower your opponents, the more likely it is that you can finish them off before your ultimate's shield expires. The shield is in and of itself highly valuable in many situations. It turns Kai'Sa into an excellent duelist since it makes you very resilient against enemy burst damage. But the real defensive potential of your ultimate is also in its mobility. Even if a fight goes terribly wrong, you can still use a marked enemy to escape for free, especially should they be placed close enough to a wall so you can jump across it. As long as you have R, assassinating Kai'Sa is effectively impossible. If they don't 100-0 you during crowd control, the dash will always save you. You can already see how powerful Kai'Sa's spells are by themselves, but in this next section we will go over the best combos and optimal sequencing for perfect results. Kai'Sa's bread and butter combo is Auto W Auto Q Auto. Maximum damage in minimal time. Whether you W first and Q second or vice versa only depends on when you are most likely to get the Q isolation damage. Of course, the more attack speed you have, the faster this combo will be, which makes it much more reliable in the late game than during the early game. But the best setups come with Kai'Sa's evolved E. Its cooldown is really low with attack speed, so using it at the beginning of the fight is optimal as you will have it back later on anyway. Additionally, your one-shot combo when used with evolved E is now unreactable since you will hit the opponent immediately out of stealth and with tons of attack speed. But there will be a point where your combo changes into E auto Q and then more auto attacks to get E back, since your attack speed items ultimately make this more reliable than casting a close range W. Over the course of the game, your W becomes less and less important as a combo finisher, but instead gradually evolves into a setup tool for your ultimate. Kai'Sa does not have to play like a traditional AD carry at all. Once you get a passive mark on the enemy backline so you can ult them, you are effectively able to cheat the concept of teamfighting entirely. Instead of having to deal with the enemy frontline trying to lock you down, you can instead instantly assassinate the opposing damage dealers, completely turning the enemy's teamfighting strategy on its head. But calculating the risk-reward of this move can be very difficult, so if you don't find an opening for your WR combo, you need something else. And when in doubt, be patient. Play at the edge of the fight with your standard combo, and once the enemy is low, you chase them with R to then safely continue the fight with numbers advantage. You also don't really need to worry about assassins while doing this. Kai'Sa cannot effectively be cheesed since her single target DPS and defensive options are so strong. Okay, so now let's go over Kai'Sa's optimal rune and item setups. You want Lethal Tempo, Presence of Mind, Legend Bloodline and Coup de Grace with Magical Footwear and Biscuit Deliveries secondary. Back in the day, Kai'Sa used to go for Hail of Blades for a keystone to give her fast access to her combo during the lane phase. With Lethal Tempo, you don't have that, and your early game is much weaker overall as a result. However, if you can find situations in which you can actually stack Lethal Tempo, Kai'Sa's passive will start carrying extremely hard. But of course, you pick Lethal Tempo these days for the amazing late game. While Hail of Blades falls off drastically, Lethal Tempo keeps scaling with your items, ramping your damage to ridiculous levels. Stacking it in the late game is super easy, and once it is stacked, you outduel anyone. For your item build, you always want the core items of Kraken Slayer first, Phantom Dancer second, and then upgrade your boots to Berserker's Greaves. Kraken Slayer by itself is already an enormous power spike as it shifts your DPS towards your auto attacks, so you don't have to rely on your inconsistent Q as much. Kraken also has perfect synergy with Lethal Tempo, since once it is stacked, you will proc your true damage over and over again. Phantom Dancer is the perfect second item for a couple of reasons. It evolves your Q, and also your E as soon as you finish boots, and the movement speed helps you to stay in range during fights. This allows for easier Lethal Tempo stacking while stacking Phantom Dancer's own attack speed passive at the same time for perfect synergy. So these are the basics, but if you want to dive deeper and learn from the best Kai'Sa players on the planet, click the link on your screen right there.